and when I boil it down, I say, you know what entrepreneurs ought to be doing? Entrepreneurs and business owners ought to be focused on how do I alleviate pain? How do I find the pain in the market and then alleviate that pain? I mean, you know, instead of being a vitamin, how do I be an aspirin? How do I identify people that are hurting and then alleviate that pain? And I think one of the best ways to do this, I call this formula I'm about to teach you, I call it a millionaire's formula, and I don't really like that title too much because I'm not a big believer in trying to help people become millionaires. What I'm a big believer in is helping you become the best you. I'm a big believer in helping you become successful. And, you know, sometimes that means you make a lot of money. But you can be successful without being a millionaire. But I labeled this the millionaire's formula. And let me tell you what I think that means. This formula, maybe it's a success formula. Maybe that would be a better word. This formula basically has three parts. And part number one is FOWTW. FOWTW. That stands for find out what they want. If you want to be successful in business, then your job is to find out what the marketplace wants. Find out where they are in pain. Where are they hurting? What needs to happen, and who's hurting? How many of them are hurting? How bad is the hurt? Find out what they want. That's number one. Number two is after you find out what they want, number two is GAGI. GAGI. Find out what they want, go and get it. Go and get it. Whatever it is they tell you, fine. Go and get that. And then number three is give it to them. Find out what they want, go and get it, and give it to them. And it seems to me that this is the formula that the most successful people on the planet have used in order to create the success they have. I mean, they may have started with a good idea. You know, they have one of these, you know, seizures and epiphanies one morning. Maybe that's where they started, but the way they became successful is not taking the idea directly to the market. The first thing they did is they went back to the market and they said, okay, if I build it, will you come? Have you seen the movie Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. No, they won't. That's a movie. That's all make-believe. Here you got dead people walking out of a cornfield. Come on, this is a movie, right? If you build it, they will not come. That's the assumption you have to make. If you're going to be successful in business, the concept of if you build it, they will come is devastating. The idea is you can have an idea, but don't start with number two. You know the problem with starting with number two is you get number two. You know what I mean? I'm okay with having an idea, but rather than just racing out and building a business around your snappy idea and then taking it to the market, go back to the market first and say, you know what? Do you guys like this? If I build it, I mean, how many orders do you want to place? You know what I tell entrepreneurs all the time? This is some of my favorite advice. Somebody comes to me and says, Keith, I got this great idea. And I want to know if you think it's a great idea. And you know what I tell everybody? That's a great idea. Because who knows if it's a good idea or a bad idea? I mean, there's been some goofy ideas out there that have made a ton of money. Right? Tweeter probably is at the top of the list, right? I mean, if somebody would have told me you could tweet and make a lot of money, I would have gone, you're kidding me. But apparently you can't. If your desire is to be successful, then I think the key is to start with the market. Find the pain in the market. Find out what they want. I tell this story because I love this story and it illustrates this point so incredibly well. Sandy and I knew each other in the 1980s. I was in the real estate business. She had a magazine business. I owned a lot of real estate. I did some advertising every once in a while. And one day, I didn't know her. One day, my secretary walks into my office and says, it's like 5 till 2 in the afternoon, and my secretary says, Keith, you have a meeting at 2 o'clock. And I looked at my calendar and I said, I don't think so. And she said, yeah, I booked this meeting and I forgot to tell you. I said, well, who's it with? And my secretary said, well, it's with somebody who owns a magazine and they want to sell you advertising. I went, oh man, I don't want to have this meeting. I said, call her and tell her that I can't have the meeting. Something's come up. And my secretary says, I can't. She's already here. I went, oh man. I said, okay, so here's what we'll do. I said, bring her in here, and then 5 minutes into the meeting, you call me. And there's going to be an emergency, and I'm going to have to end this meeting, right? And so that was the plan. So my secretary goes out, gets this magazine owner. Magazine owner comes to my door. She, they're standing there at my door, and I look up from my desk, and I took one look at Sandy, and I said, I don't know why you're here, but I'm going to do whatever you tell me. I don't know what you're selling, but I'm buying. I said, you are the prettiest woman I've ever seen. I said, come on in here and have a seat. So we started talking. 5 minutes later, the phone started ringing. I'm ignoring the phone, right? Phone's ringing, ringing, ringing. Then it stops, and then like 2 seconds later, it starts ringing again. Finally, my secretary comes in and says, Keith, there's been an emergency. And I said, whoever died, tell them to wait. I'll be with them in a little while. I'm going to have this meeting. I get to the end of the meeting. I bought a lot of advertising. And over the next, couple years, I got to know Sandy. We did some business together, and I became a very large customer of hers. The crash came, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to get out of debt and out of property, and obviously I'm not buying advertising at that point. So Sandy and I lost track of each other. And, then I go through a bankruptcy. I go through a divorce. I mean, it was my kids. I mean, oh my gosh, what a mess. And so I rebuild, and I'm single. And I had been single about 8 or 9 years. And I'm at a Christmas party in 2000. And saw a friend of mine, Jerry, at a Christmas party, and Jerry and I got to talking, and Jerry had known me a long, long time. He said, who are you dating? And I said, nobody. And he said, would you like to? And I said, yeah, I really would. He said, how about Sandy? I went, holy cow, I totally forgot about her. I said, is she still here? And he said, yes, she is. And I said, do you have her number? And he said, I do. So I got Sandy's number, and on the way home from the Christmas party, I called Sandy on the phone, and she answered, and I said, Sandy, it's Keith. And she said, who? I said, Keith Cunningham. And she said, oh yeah, how are you? How you been? And I said, great. I said, I just ran into Jerry, because she knew Jerry too. I just ran into Jerry. I said, would you like to go to dinner? And she said, yeah, I'll do that. And I said, how about Friday night? She said, good. And I said, how about if I pick you up at 7:30? And she said, how about if I meet you there? That's not good, is it? That's not good. This is not a good sign. So we did. We met at the restaurant. We talked. We got reacquainted. I mean, it was 2 hours of a great conversation. I mean, great. And we're clicking, and by this time I'm 50 years old when this happened, and at 50 years old, I kind of know what I want, what I don't want. I've been single for a while. I'm pretty clear about who I am and what I want my life to be about. I'm enjoying this conversation, and I said something to Sandy that I've never said to another woman. I looked at her and I said, can I ask you a question? And she said, of course. I said, what do you want? And she said, what do you mean, what do I want? I said, what do you want? What do you want in a relationship? She said, I've never been asked that question before. She said, I want to be loved and adored. So I called the waiter over. I said, bring me a pen and a piece of paper. And he did, and I wrote down at the top of this piece of paper, loved and adored. And I said, now here's what's got to happen. I need for you to tell me everything that needs to happen for you to feel loved and adored. Everything. And the woman talked for an hour and a half. It was the most comprehensive and spectacular list I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm calling the waiter over to get more paper. I'm running out of ink. I'm going, oh man, okay, good. So I made a list of what does she want and then what has to happen for her to feel that way. Let me put it in business terms. What has to happen for your customers to experience success? You write that down. I just said something very important. What has to happen? What has to happen for the customer to feel success? What has to happen for Sandy to feel loved and adored, for her to have that success? So man, I'm writing it down, and it's everything from opening doors and holding her hand and not getting all anxious if we're running 5 minutes late and she's, just getting her makeup or her hair. I mean, being her best friend, not trying to solve every problem that comes up, sometimes be a listener, somebody to grow old with. And all that was on her list. And finally, thankfully, she stopped. And I looked at her and I said, okay, so I can draw a line, right? If all of this happens, then you're going to feel loved and adored. And she said, that's right. Now, I want you to remember, this is our first date after 2 hours. Well, now it's three and a half, right? She looked at me. Sandy's very smart. She looked at me and said, let me borrow your piece of paper and your pencil. And I said, why? She said, because I'm about to ask you, what do you want? I said, my list isn't that long. I only got 3 things on my list, right? I said, look, I want loved and adored, and I want to create spectacular. That's really what my life is about. It's about spectacular. How do I create spectacular? One of my guru teachers said to me, he said, Keith, if you could have one last thought, and then you died, what do you want that last thought to be? One last thought, and then you died. What do you want the last thought to be? What a great question. What a great question. That's why we should be living our life. That's our obituary. I thought about that. I meditated. I owned. I did all that stuff. I mean, I really did. I went to work on that question. And ultimately, what I came up with was, if I could have one last thought, it would be, whoa, oh, that was spectacular. That was spectacular. This was my life. And I'm proud of it. And I would gladly live it again, if only given the opportunity. Whoa! I told Sandy, I want to be loved and adored, and I want to create spectacular in my life. Sandy said, what needs to happen? I told her all 3 things. And really, it is only 3. And since that time, what we're about is, what are the things that need to be done so that she can feel the way she wants to feel? What are the things that she needs to do for me so that I can feel the way I want to feel? One of the things on Sandy's list, I'll never forget this. I'm making the list. I'm writing it down. I'm looking at her and I'm writing and I'm going, good, good, give me more, just everything. I need it all. Whatever it is, I need it all. Well, she said, you know what I'd like? She said, I'd like a note every day. I looked up at her and I said, you got to be kidding me. A note every day. My God, that's a lot of pressure every day. She said, that's what it's going to take. A note every day. I wrote it down. I put a little star by it. And I kept coming back to it. I said, are you sure you need this note? I mean, that's a lot of work. What if I forget? She said, I'll remind you. She does sometimes, right? I'll be sitting there, it gets to be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden I'll get an email, and the email says, did the postman get lost today? And I go, oh, dang. I start writing, So sometimes I do forget. But the reality is, every day for the last 8 or 9 years, she's got a note every day. It's called an Oh Baby. That's what we call it, Oh Baby. And so it's an email, or maybe it's a postcard or something, but the heading is always Oh Baby. And, sometimes they're short and sweet and romantic, and sometimes they're long, and, sometimes they're just nasty, right? I mean, she didn't tell me what kind of note, so some of you have met her. If you haven't, you need to. She's sitting right back over here. She is truly my best friend and my partner, and I adore you. Give her a hand. Find out what they want. Go and get it. Give it to them. You know what our problem is? Our problem is we're playing pin the tail on the donkey. That's the problem. We do it in our relationships. We do it in our businesses. We do it with our customers. We never bother to find out what the heck does the customer want, what's got to happen for them to have success. We just start with our idea, and then we go and give it to them, and then we wonder why our businesses are struggling. We wonder why we're not growing, because we never bothered to go sit down and have the dang conversation. What do you want?